Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, April 5th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Democrat Rita Hart in the state of Iowa, specifically Iowa's 2nd Congressional District, and her bid to, in a sense, overturn the election results that were certified by the state of Iowa. Now, this goes a little bit further than what can be compared to President Trump and his claims of election fraud. What happened in the 2nd Congressional District in Iowa is a bit more trickier because it comes down to a very, very close race, an extremely close race at that. In the 2nd District, in the 2020 presidential election, Mariannette Miller Meeks won 196,964 votes. The Democrat Rita Hart won 196,958 votes, a difference of just 6 votes with over nearly 400,000 votes cast in the district itself. So a very, very close election, very close, coming down to the wire where nobody really knew who won until there was a full recount and the election was certified, and ultimately it put the Republican Party ahead. Now, if you're looking at how much 6 votes actually is in a total of 400,000, that is 0.000015%. So we're talking about the most minuscule of minuscule margins in the 2nd District. Well, if the state of Iowa did actually certify it, why is the Democrat contesting it? Why is the Democratic Party, in a sense, saying that this race was unfair and that it should not be, that this Republican should not be seated? Well, with the idea in mind that this is an extremely close race, one of the closest races we've seen, at least in modern history, possibly within the American electorate. I've seen, some Senate races that have been decided by 4 votes. I think my home state of Maryland was decided by 4 votes back in the 1800s, but 6 votes on a House race is still extremely close, especially in a district that is so large that covers nearly 500,000 people in terms of voters, which I find to be very interesting. That 6 votes really brought it down to this point. But let's go ahead and see what was the argument from the Democratic Party in this state. More specifically, what was the argument from Rita Hart, the Democrat? So let's go ahead and see. Well, if you go through, there's a very long arguments being made on both sides, very long documents. You don't need to read through them all. Essentially, what Rita Hart was saying was that because this race was won by 6 votes, every single vote counts. Correct? Well, there were 22 votes that were not counted by the state of Iowa due to a number of things. And Rita Hart says that if these 22 ballots in specific were counted, she would have won by 9 votes rather than lose by 6. So looking at the reason why some of these votes were thrown out, the Hart campaign highlighted that 5 absentee ballots cast in her favor were not counted because they were not properly sealed. In certain cases, sometimes people put tape over their absentee ballot and then it gets thrown out because then it could have been tampered with. If it's not properly sealed, there is no telling as to whether or not it has been tampered with. However, a lot of the times, you will see people argue, why not give them the benefit of the doubt? But sometimes people do go very in-depth with these election laws, and traditionally in a normal election, 22 votes really wouldn't matter, but they certainly do now. And they certainly did, specifically in this election. 22 ballots when it was decided by 6, I can see exactly why people would want these 22 to be counted, especially if you're on the losing side. However, it does raise issues of hypocrisy, and while the issue may not necessarily be comparable to Donald Trump's, I still think that it is bad optics. A lot of American politics is simply how the American public views it, and as unfortunate as it is for the Democratic Party, they can't in one breath go after Donald Trump for trying to overturn the election results and then support this. While the situations are very different, and I acknowledge that, everything is optics. What you are going to see are headlines that the Democratic Party wanted to overturn an election result. It doesn't matter if they wanted to do it legally or if they wanted to go to the state legislatures the way Donald Trump did. It's a very different scenario, yes, but the media will not clarify that, and the American public will not do research. Most people aren't watching my YouTube channel here. Most people aren't reading too in depth into the NPR articles or the New York Times articles or the Hill, Washington Post, whatever it might be. They're getting the headlines, and that's exactly what I think could negatively affect the Democratic Party. And I've highlighted a few things here just to highlight what I actually wanted to talk about. Well, the reason why this was possible, first of all, is because the Constitution gives both the House and the Senate authority to decide how to seat its members. And the Federal Contested Elections Act grants the authority to review House elections to the House Administration Committee. Back in 2018, before we look at that 2nd district, I want to draw my attention to the 9th district here in North Carolina. it ultimately came to a point where the House of Representatives said that they would not seat a single person from this seat. They will not seat the Democrat. They will not seat the Republican. They will not seat the Libertarian. There were accusations of voter mishandling, voter fraud in a very broad sense. And looking at what happened, the race was never called. It came down to a very narrow margin, and Mark Harris was actually replaced. The state legislature realized that Mark Harris had such a tampered name that they changed the law, because before that law had changed in 2018, people had to run the same candidate again for the special election, but Mark Harris was denied that privilege, replaced, and then a Republican ended up winning in the 9th district. But the point is, this was a very close race. Not expected to be super narrow. I mean, if you're looking at the way that it was decided, it was expected to be, yes, a toss-up, but 0.4% is very, very close. Some of these toss-up races in the New York Times column were decided by 5-10 points. So the 9th district was especially close. And looking at the allegations here, the House ultimately decided that no one would be seated in this race. Well, in the 2nd district here, I'm going to zoom in here. We'll talk about the results in just a few moments. But essentially, what was being asked was that Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats were to seat Rita Hart rather than Marionette Miller Meeks, out of them saying if these absentee ballots had been counted, that Rita Hart would have won the election. And that's what Rita Hart's objective was in this petition to the House of Representatives. And the NPR News article actually notes, and I'm going to read it verbatim. While it is not unusual for defeated candidates in close races to petition the House to review their election, the House has almost never sided in favor of a petitioner. Since 1933, 110 campaigns have requested that the panel review an election, according to a committee aide. In all but 3 cases, those petitions were rejected. According to a nonpartisan congressional research service, in one case, the House agreed to seat no one and left the seat vacant. I assume that is with the 9th district. But if you're looking at the success rate here, we're talking about a 2.7% success rate. So Rita Hart went into this probably knowing this. I mean, she was shot down at every single level and then eventually went to the House. This was not her first step, but it was probably her last. And as we find out today, she is dropping this challenge in the House of Representatives. Yes, it was decided by 6 votes. Potentially, she could have won had the 22 ballots been counted. But again, in a regular type of election, those 22 ballots would not have been had any type of focus. I understand that they are very important specifically in this election, but the Democratic Party will look hypocritical. It doesn't matter how they try to spin this. All the American public is going to see that after months of slamming President Trump for his baseless claims of election fraud, and while Rita Hart, I could say, looking at her argument, I can see that this is a different argument than what Donald Trump was making. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's about public perception. It's about how the media will spin this. I can guarantee you, no matter what type of media source, they will pick this up, and they already are. As you can see, it's on NPR, it's on the New York Times, it's on CNN, it's on Fox News, and the reason why they're doing it is because it gets clicks. And I think that at the end of the day, this would not have been a good look for the Democratic Party had they overturned the election results, even if they truly thought that there was substance to this claim. And I'm sure many of them did, but they were apprehensive. In fact, at the end of this article, they maybe not this one, I believe on the New York Times article, they reference a tweet, and we'll go back to those highlighted points in just a moment. Actually, they don't. I think it might be on this NPR article, but the tweet was made, from Representative Dean Phillips, and Politico says that looking at this, it pretty much just discusses the Rita Hart scenario where she is going to go ahead and go into the House of Representatives and try to ask them to review the election and eventually seat her. But then this Representative Dean Phillips, says that losing a House election by 6 votes is painful for Democrats, but overturning it in the House would be even more painful for America. Just because a majority can does not mean a majority should. And that's something that I think many people are going to realize, that, while the Democratic Party did have the ability to do it, the question is, should they? And people understand that the House majority is very, very slim. Right now, 219 to 211 with vacancies included. And what Dean Phillips is saying, and I'm sure many other top Democrats, Dean Phillips is not from Iowa, he's from Minnesota, the 3rd district there, but he's a Democrat. He does get to argue some of these things. And if you're looking at the House majority, yes, it is narrow. Yes, 1 seat could technically make a difference. But is it worth losing 10 more in the midterms? Is it worth losing 20 more in the midterms if Republicans pick up with this and label the Democrats as hypocritical? Because I can see, as easily as the Republicans tried to tie random candidates across the country to AOC, to Nancy Pelosi, to Ilhan Omar, to the squad in general, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, whatever it might be, the progressive left and Nancy Pelosi have been used and attached onto random candidates scattered across the country, and we could see the same exact thing happen here with the 2nd district race had the Democrats overturned it. I think this was honestly the best, at least looking at the way that it's being viewed by the American public, I think that was the best course of action that could have been taken. I think the Democratic Party would not have done better in 2022 had they seated her. Getting 1 seat, you would lose 10. And when I say lose 10, I'm not over-exaggerating. In 2010, the Democratic Party lost 63 seats to the Republican Party. So looking at what eventually could have happened, I think it is certainly possible that this one race, and yes, while it was painful for Democrats, as Dean Phillips notes, it may be painful, but there would be a lot more pain down the way had they followed through with this. Because if the state of Iowa was saying no, if the recount was saying the results are certified, after the Democratic Party just went to the House and said these state certified results are 100% accurate, there is no reason to vote against the certification of certain states, and then they go ahead and say, wait a minute, maybe not in the 2nd district, it looks hypocritical. It doesn't matter if it truly is. It doesn't matter if it isn't. It looks hypocritical. And that's all American politics. Optics. That's how everything goes down. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the things I highlighted. I think that it'll just focus a little bit more on what I wanted to point out. So essentially, she was asking to be seated and that the House used their majority to influence the outcome of this election and say, we think, even though the state of Iowa might not think this, we think if these ballots were counted, that Rita Hart would be the next representative from Iowa's 2nd district. And the interesting thing is that Iowa's 2nd is actually the most Democratic district in the entire state. It just ended up going to a Republican for Donald Trump. That was the reason. But if you're looking at it, it says that there is a difference. The New York Times article does note that difference that I mentioned as well, that it's not something that, was baseless in terms of its claim. It did have some type of merit, but again, optics. And Rita Hart argues that if it had been counted, she would have won. And while people understand that, people say, that isn't something that you can always argue, because if your state is shooting it down, if your local offices are shooting it down, now you're turning to the House because the Democrats have a majority. That would never stand in a Republican House for very obvious reasons. And Nancy Pelosi says that it's routine business. But it's certainly some moderates are speaking out against it because they do come from competitive districts that think that this will look bad for the Democratic Party. And they're right. And if you're looking at this, I think that there was a collective sigh of relief from the House Democrats here that she's abandoning her election challenge. I really don't think she's going to run again in 2022. She might, but I really think this taints her name. Yes, it was a close race. Yes, it was one of the closest we've seen in modern political history in a House race. But also you have to realize that even though it might be close, you cannot tell people that, these votes should have been counted and therefore I would have won. It sounds very much like you're grasping for straws. And in a normal election, these votes would not have mattered. And that's the thing. Nobody would have cared about the 22 because they wouldn't have needed to. Had these 22, had the margin of victory been 23, this would have ended long ago. But since it was by 6, yes, I understand that every single vote matters, but I think it was the best move in the eyes of the Democratic Party to have Rita Hart drop this and to focus their energy on possibly winning that seat in 2022. Because when the Republican wins by 6 votes, it's better time spent canvassing and hiring and volunteering and door knocking, whatever it might be. I mean, that's sort of canvassing, phone banking, whatever it might be, to flip this district in 2022. That's where the efforts should be on the Democratic Party side. It should not be on overturning an election that was seemingly held in full accuracy and held in full security. And I think that it's just looking at the district's history, it's absolutely winnable. That's what I wanted to show you here. The Democratic Party won in Iowa's 2nd district by 12 points in 2018. The one district that went blue is the 3rd district here in 2020. And looking at it, it was won by just 1.4% because there was an incumbent there. But if you look at the margin back in 2018, it was decided by around 2 points. And if you're looking at the first district in Iowa as well, it was decided by a narrower margin than the second district. So the second district is 100% winnable. I think the Democratic Party certainly has the ability to win it in the future. And I think that their efforts are better spent on trying to win the second district rather than try to overturn an election that would be very bad for the Democratic Party in the future, at least in the immediate future. I don't know. I don't think this will have a super lasting effect. I'm not going to try to draw out how much this would have had an impact, but I do think it would have had a direct implication on the 2022 midterms, especially after the Democratic Party spent such a large time, attacking Donald Trump for his claims and asking certain, Brad Raffensperger or certain state legislatures or Senate presidents, whatever it might be, to overturn the election results. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2022 midterm election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.